Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Political reflections: how to predict a coup. The Economist. Two aging presidents, one bad and one awful, were forced from office this month. Abdelaziz Bouteflika in Algeria and Omar al-Bashir in Sudan. Mr. Bouteflika has been in power since 1999. Mr. Bashir since 1989. Their hasty and unlamented departures raise a question: how easy is it to predict a coup? And they've given us a roadmap, which is quite interesting. I've got one disagreement, but let me take it up with them. One obstacle to building a good coup predicting model is that coups are extremely rare and becoming even more so. Perhaps the most rigorous quantitative forecast of sudden regime changes is CoupCast, published by One Earth Future, an NGO. It finds that economic misery is linked to higher coup risk, and then you normally get a match thrown on the tinderbox, right? So a surge in bread prices or something like that, as is extreme weather. But political factors matter more. Dictators tend to lose popularity when they stay in office for too long. Autocrats who cling to power after losing elections are particularly likely to be deposed. The strongest predictor of future instability is past instability. CoupCast rated Algeria the country most likely to experience a coup just before Mr. Bouteflika's exit. As for who might be next, the leaders of Burkina Faso, Afghanistan, and South Sudan should be nervous. I wrote about this severally this year, and I said recently in Africa in particular, a lot of leadership is in the departure lounge, but Bouteflika is surely the most extreme example. Kapuscinski: if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. I keep repeating that because I think it's very powerful. And it's a question of the crowd. The crowd is asymmetric, but does it have sufficient strength to face down the regime? And I don't think that the UAE and the kingdom can buy off the crowd. I really don't, because from what I've seen unfold in front of my eyes, I think we're watching an inflection point in the battle between the street and the regime, everywhere you care to look. But the most proximate examples are Sudan and Algeria. Take you back to November 2014 when I was writing about Ouagadougou. And I said then, this demographic dividend turned into a demographic terminator for Blaise Compaoré, and that it was set to alter the existing equilibrium, or should we call it disequilibrium, between the rulers and the subjects. And I said a rebalancing has begun, but Africa's non-linear. The rebalancing does not happen in a linear manner. And this is the question I posed. We need to ask ourselves, how many people can an incumbent or a military transitional council shoot stone cold dead in the street? Because they need to clear the street. That's why people are not clearing the street in Khartoum. How many people can an incumbent shoot stone cold dead? 100, 1,000, or 10,000? This is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. An incumbent who was very clever at staying below this threshold, of course, is President Joseph Kabila of Arnold Schwarzenegger fame. I will be back. And I said, where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. Trump brought the head of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, to the Oval Office, where he complained about losing followers. The president's latest salvo arrived just hours before he met with Dorsey. Trump accused Twitter of playing political games and tampering with his nearly 60 million followers. Apparently, Dorsey told him that many of them were bots. Twitter long has explained that follower figures fluctuate as the company takes action to remove fraudulent spam accounts. In the meeting, Dorsey stressed that point, noting even he had lost followers as part of Twitter's work to enforce its policies, according to the source who described the meeting as cordial. President Trump has utilized Twitter in the most extraordinary manner. He has basically undercut the ground from his detractors. He's spoken direct, unfiltered, and set the narrative consistently over all this period of time. And frankly, he would have been banged to rights if he didn't have Twitter, as far as I'm concerned, in the Mueller case. So they are tied to the hip, are Jack and POTUS. We live in Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says he will name a Golan town after Trump. That sums it up. CCTV footage has emerged of a suspected suicide bomber entering St. Sebastian's Church in Sri Lanka moments before an explosion. Hervé, my friend in Kinshasa, tweeted, "It's Warholian." I went back to my article, The Brothers Saneev and the Long Tail, and I said, put it in a different way, there are surely many brothers Saneev in this new 21st century of ours. And I was quoting Camus, the Byronic hero they think they are. Incapable of love, or capable only of an impossible love, suffers endlessly. He is solitary, languid, his condition exhausts him. If he wants to feel alive, it must be in the terrible exaltation of a brief and destructive action. Don DeLillo in Mao too, I used to think it was possible for an artist to alter the inner life of the culture. Now bomb makers and gunmen have taken that territory. This catastrophic event changes the way we think and act moment to moment, week to week, for unknown weeks and months to come. In steely years, our world, parts of our world, have crumbled into theirs, which means we're living in a place of danger and rage. Terror's response is a narrative that has been developing over years, only now becoming inescapable. It is our lives and minds that are occupied now. This catastrophic event changes the way we think and act, moment to moment, week to week, for unknown weeks and months to come in steely years. And then in September 2012, when we had those events at the US Embassy in Libya, and I was asking, what are the consequences of this 21st century madding crowd? A madding crowd which can be inflamed by a fellow with a camera and an account with YouTube. There are plenty of flamethrowers in a population of 7 billion. Basile has shown that the 21st century equivalent of throwing the match is a camera and the knowledge of how to upload content onto YouTube. The consequences of throwing a match onto a tinderbox are entirely unpredictable by their nature. The end of normal, says The Economist, a terrifying look at the consequences of climate change. Climate change is a devilish problem for humanity, at once urgent and slow-moving, immediate and distant, real and abstract. Conundrum for writers. 200 million climate refugees by 2050, the UN warns. Talking about how in 5 of the 20 worst fires in California's history blazed in 2017. The deadliest incinerated the town of Paradise last year. Floods are becoming wetter, droughts drier, hurricanes fiercer. Such calamities, Mr. Wallace Wells notes, are not the new normal. They mark the end of normal. As climate change tips Earth beyond the conditions that allowed humans to evolve in the first place. And that is with barely 1 degree centigrade of man-made warming since the Industrial Revolution. Within a few decades, this could mean that temperatures in Mecca rendered the Hajj physically impossible for many of the 2 million Muslims who make the pilgrimage each year. And I wrote about this in my article over the weekend when I said all the available evidence is informing us that the weather tail risk is seriously elevated on a near-term, medium-term and long-term basis. Economists like N.N. Taleb might characterize what I'm outlining as tail risks. Tail risk is the additional risk of an asset or portfolio of assets moving more than 3 standard deviations from its current price, above the risk of a normal distribution. Tail risk is sometimes defined less strictly as merely the risk or probability of rare events. Taleb made his fortune and name correctly betting that the market was mispricing tail risks, or we can call it haywire risk. All the available evidence is informing us that the weather tail risk is seriously elevated on a near-term, medium-term and long-term basis, and in a very non-linear outcome, Africa has 18 of the 20 most climate-affected countries. November 2015, on the same point, I said, I cannot help feeling that we're like frogs in boiling water. The executions were carried out by beheading, and the authorities pinned 2 of the bodies to a pole as a warning to others. This is Saudi Arabia, 37 people executed or beheaded for terrorism. The warning is, of course, not what it says on the label. It's not about terrorism. It's about opposition to the position of the House of Saud. One of those executed in Saudi Arabia today is the Dean of the English Department at Jeddah University, Sheikh Mohammed Al-Attiyah, which is interesting, which tells you that the intellectuals are also in opposition.